Welcome to Mindset Mastery, the ultimate podcast for entrepreneurs, business owners, and anyone interested in learning from the top minds in business. Today, we are joined by Chris Chapman. Chris Chapman is an executive director at Capital Analytics and founder of Next Level Minds. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you, and it's an honor to have you on, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely, Thomas. I'm definitely excited to dive in once we get started in a bit.
Do you mind just giving everyone a background about your professional career? When did you start? How has your career arc evolved over the years? And how did you get into the business that you're doing now?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So before I share about myself, I always like to add that, it's a continuous journey. So it's not a final destination where I'm at. I've reached a destination that I want, but now I have my next destination in mind. So I always like to encourage the listeners of have a goal, but then have another goal after that and continue progress there.
I love that.
But that said, I really, my story starts when I was in high school. I was very entrepreneurial. I started a landscaping company where I just cut grass for random people in the neighborhood. I know a lot of entrepreneurs probably started similar. So I had, entrepreneurial tendencies growing up. Ended up going to college at Clemson University, where I majored in business and entrepreneurship. Got as involved as I could, fraternity, business clubs, nonprofits. So I always encourage, if there's any college listeners, to get as involved as you can, because that's going to grow your skill set and your network and just your overall resume for later in life. So I got really involved there and worked part-time at Allstate Insurance my junior and senior year, just getting heavy in the sales world. Graduated, spent a year in the IT staffing and solution space as an account manager, which is really where I got my feet wet in the business and sales world. Is very client facing. So building relationships, cold calling, proposals, kind of everything related to sales and business. And then jumped over to Capital Analytics, which is also where some of my more entrepreneurial side of things start. Because in 2019, I also started Next Level Minds, which is both a podcast as well as a coaching company. And then I was also starting at Capital Analytics as an executive director, and we build out business publications in 20 different cities. And my role is I'm in charge of the North Carolina region. So it's kind of a mix between a sales position, a management position, and just kind of overall business strategy. So I always tell people, I definitely split my time between the typical 8 to 5 sales world, but by night I host a podcast, and then I also have a number of clients that I work with where I help them with goal setting, personal development, habit formation, a lot of the stuff that I know you work on as well with your mastermind. So.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's amazing. And do you mind sharing about your forward projection that you mentioned with, where you're at now, but the goal that you have moving forward in the future?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So really the more future goal is to continue to grow the coaching business as well as the podcast, and really just turn that into more of a business to business sales training company. Because I found that the two platforms I'm best at is one, sales. I'm fortunate to be the number one at my company right now. And
nice.
Two, coaching, developing others. I was always that guy in high school that people would hit up for advice. Hey, I need help with this. And at that time in high school, you thought it was like the biggest problem in the world. And then you realize like it's really not that big a deal, right? So I was always that guy that people came to him for advice. So, kind of roundabout answers is the goal to take that more full time. But really the play right now is just to continue to build up as many clients on the side. And I think a lot of people look at the 8 to 5 and kind of a thing that holds them back, which that can be true. But I also think it's a uniquely to look at the 8 to 5 as like, all right, well, I can build skills here. I can build relationships. I can build out my network. I can build out, systems, processes, and procedures. And I can learn from the company that I'm at to then eventually take my thing full time. But I think there does come a point where it's your side hustle or your side business, if you will, is starting to grow so much that it's like, doesn't make sense for you to stay in that role. So that's what I always like to share too. And I'm not at that point yet. And I have no problem working for somebody else in that 8 to 5 while I'm doing the thing on the side. But I think it's also important to like manage the two as well and not just give all your time in one area if you're trying to grow that side hustle. So,
yeah, no, I love that. I don't know if you're familiar all too much with Jim Rohn, but I'm a huge fan. And he says kind of something similar, work full time on your living and part-time on your fortune so that you can create that business, because profits are much better than wages. So yeah, that's
Sure.
I think that's great advice for a lot of people. Some people will think that they just got to jump full in, and maybe for some people that's good. But to have that stability and also to learn what other companies are doing that are already successful and seek out mentorship and that sort of thing, I think is so valuable and can really help accelerate and avoid a lot of mistakes that you can make on your journey if you're, on your own and just trying to figure it out first time.
No, dude, 100%. And I always give people advice as well of like, if you want to start your own thing one day, but you are in the position where maybe you're not ready from a skill set wise or financially, I always tell people, if you're going to go work somewhere, try to work somewhere that helps you build skills that are going to help you launch into a business. So for example, like, let's say you want to start, a marketing agency. Don't go work as an engineer in an engineering company, because like, you're not going to really gain the skill sets. For example, back in 2019 and 2020, me and two co-founders tried to launch a mobile travel app, which I didn't even touch on in my background. But like, we had users, we had a beta version, we had acceptance into 2 startup accelerators, we had conversations with more investors than I can count. But there was such a gap missing because we were trying to build a travel app and none of us really had experience in the mobile app space. And none of us had experience really in that like business to consumer travel space. Versus looking back, it would be like, okay, I want to start a travel app. I'm not ready to take it full time yet. Why don't I go work for like a Yelp, a TripAdvisor, you name it, and learn kind of more about the travel space while also doing this on the side. And that's aligns with what I'm doing right now, because it's in sales, it's building relationships. And I'm going to obviously need to continue to cultivate that knowledge in order to start, more of the sales training type of programs in the future. So.
Yeah. No, 100%. I agree with that approach, for, I would say, probably 90% of people. So what is the like biggest lesson that you have learned going through your entire career so far and leading up to where you are now for, business perspective, that is?
Yeah, that's a really good question, man. I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned is that there's this phrase out there. It's like, oh, money doesn't grow on trees. And that's 100% true. I think money grows in relationships with people. And it's not being greedy or it's not being selfish. It's being intentional about wanting to meet as many people as possible and wanting to help them reach their goals in life. And if you can help others reach their goals in life, obviously you'll have no problem reaching your goals. I know that's been said in numerous books. So I think that's a big learning lesson for me. And especially like in the Southeast where I live, a lot of business gets done based on relationships. And so for new entrepreneurs or business owners, or even just new people in their career, I always encourage like build as many solid relationships as you can, because that's what's going to help drive you forward at the end of the day. And I've closed a bunch of deals and landed new clients in the coaching business just from building strong relationships with people where they like doing business with me. And yes, you have to have a good product or service. That's a whole part of the equation. But a lot of people will just do business with you, even if you, Thomas, have the same exact product and service I do, but maybe they have a better relationship with me. They're probably going to choose me over you at the end of the day, just because it's that trust factor there,
Yeah, totally. So what would your advice be for going out and building relationships? How do you cultivate relationships and nurture them so that they can turn into money, right?
Yep. So 2 things with that. One is at a networking event, I do something called the 1, 2, 3 method, which I'm glad you asked for that, because I actually just spoke about that the other day.
Perfect.
And basically what the 1, 2, 3 method is most people, when they show up to a networking event, they go 3 places. They either go to the corner of the room, they go to the food station, or they go to, at times, my personal favorite, the bar, right? And so that doesn't really get you anywhere. But what the 1, 2, 3 method is as soon as you walk in, you're obviously walking in with confidence. And the first group of people you see, you interrupt the conversation in a very, polite, kind way. Hey, nice to meet you guys. The first group I saw, I just walked in. My name's Chris Chapman, wanted to introduce myself, and then get their names, be like, hey, I want to say hey to a couple more groups, but just wanted to introduce myself. Do that to the second group, and then do that to the third group. And now I say all this because when someone walks into an event, everyone else in the event is looking at that person who just walked in, and humans are judgmental creatures. So they're like, oh, who's this person? Never seen him, or maybe I recognize him. But if you go up to 3 groups of people, let's say there's 4 in each group in less than 5 minutes and say hello, that's 12 people you've said hello to. And now everyone else that just saw you walk in instantly has this perception of like, man, this guy or this girl is one of the most popular people in the room. And now everyone's going to start coming up to you. It's just this weird kind of like psychological thing that happens. And now the introverts are probably like, no, I don't want everyone coming up to me. I don't want everyone coming up to me. So my biggest advice to like build those relationships is be extremely curious, 80% you asking questions and listening, and like the 20% of you actually talking, right? It's reversed now because you're hosting and I'm the guest. But, if I'm at a networking event with you, I'm going to start asking some questions. Hey, are you from this area? You got any fun plans this weekend? Right. And like, that's going to help you cultivate that relationship. And then the last thing I'll say is like how to turn that into more of a client is just be very intentional with wanting to help them. And frankly, just using the word help a lot. So if you have like a marketing consulting agency, say, hey, it was great talking to you. By the way, our company does A, B, C, D. If you ever need help in this aspect, we'd love to help you with some of your goals or initiatives that are out there. And then just kind of simply leaving it at that. And then that's relationship's going to grow over time. But if you're too salesy with it, of like, as soon as you hit the conversation, hey, here's my card. It's like, no.
Business card.
Yeah. Like build it first. And then the last thing I'll say is people want to be seen, heard, and remembered in life. And so I think when you're talking with that person, and if you tell that, hey, I'm talking to Thomas at a networking event, we may have another conversation over a coffee in a week. And you just told me it's Thursday and this weekend you're going to go, I don't know, out to lunch with your sister. Like, I better remember that. And next time we meet, I'm like, hey, Thomas, you said you were going out to lunch with your sister. Where'd you guys end up going? And you're going to be like, wow, this guy like paid attention. He remembered. And then that instantly drives more of that connectivity point versus like most people are not even going to like listen to what they have to say and not even remember it. So,
yeah, no, that's really good advice. I see that I've done this when I first started going to networking events. I've seen other people do this too, but just go and get everybody's number, trade business cards with every single person, and then you try reaching out to every single person. But I found that when you do that, it's more of like it's almost like a spam, mass text or email. And I find that it's much better to, you want to meet everybody, but really focus on a select few number of people that you can really develop and provide value for them, instead of trying to reach back out to 100 people. Pick 5 people that you really connected with and develop that relationship with. And I found that to be really helpful.
Yeah, man, I love you mentioned that. And I was actually just working with a client the other day doing some sales coaching, and he's like, yeah, I got 20 meetings next week. And I'm like, okay, like how many of those are actually like qualified, good people that you could sell your product? He's like, probably like 7. And so I always tell people like, I'd much rather you have 8 super qualified meetings where maybe 5 of them are going to turn into clients, rather than 20 meetings with only 2 of them, because you only have so much time at the end of the day. So I think it's being strategic about like, hey, I just met Thomas. Does he actually like somebody that could maybe A, introduce me to somebody, or B, somebody that could actually work with me? And if not, like they may be the coolest person, but if you're trying to drive business, like it's not important to follow up with that person and cultivate the relationship. So.
Yeah, 100%. Another really good piece of advice I got from networking was, think of it as a marathon, right? It's not something that you need to get a value exchange like instantly, right when you meet the person, or in the first week or the first month. It may take a decade, and it may even be an exchange where you meet someone who's an expert in sales, for example, and building sales teams. And 5 years later, I may follow up with an email every Christmas just so you kind of remember me. And at some point I may need some like knowledge or an expert in that field, and I can go ahead and reach out and say, hey, Chris, I don't know if you remember me, but we met at this event, X, Y, and Z. I know you're an expert. I really am like, I'm struggling with this problem. Is there any chance you could carve out 15 minutes? And I don't even think it would take 15 minutes. And so those relationships, if you can nurture for that long term, you can turn it into a lot. You can get a lot from it, and you don't need something instantly.
Yeah, and it's just keeping that top of mind and like continuing to check in when the time's right. So
yeah. Do you mind sharing a little bit more about your coaching business and who specifically you work with? Is it business people? Is it a little bit of everyone? Or could you walk us through that a bit?
Yeah. So really our main target audience and mission is to really help the younger generation transition from that college level to the workforce, because I
Mm,
do think it's a really hard transition because in college, most people are going to class, maybe doing a little bit of homework, and then they have 12 hours of free time throughout the day, right? They're going to the pool, playing video games, hanging out with friends, like whatever it is. And then you go from so much free time to 8 to 5, or if you're running your own business, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. if you're trying to get it off the ground. And I think it's this hard transition. And now you're having to deal with this crazy hours. You're having to deal with building relationships, you're having to build with social, you're having to deal with finances. And it's like, whoa, all this stuff's coming at me. And so that's really my passion with Next Level Minds coaching, is to help that generation transition from college to the workforce. And really a lot of things I do is just, hey, like, let's talk about what your goals are for the next couple of years. And then let's reverse engineer these goals into monthly. And then let's reverse engineer that into the habits. And I like to call it the income producing activities that are going to actually drive the results. Because I think a lot of times people have the goal of like, all right, well, a common one that I hear a lot is like, I want to get my first house. Like I work with a lot of 25 to 30-year-olds, and that's an age where some people will look for a house. I want to get my first house. And it's like, all right, well, do you have the down payment? No. Do you know where you want to buy? No. And it's like a lot of it's no, but then working with them, be like, okay, what kind of house you want? What price point you want? What down payment do you need? And then reverse engineering. Okay, well, you need X amount. If you need X amount, how much do you have to save per month? Like, and that's just a financial example, but I think a lot of people like don't break it down, and that's really what I help them do. And then at the same point of time, like I am great at time management, and I'm great at just efficiencies around it. And so I also help others with that as well, if they're like growing in their career, but maybe they're trying to get a side thing off the ground as well.
I love that. So I'm really curious, what is your time management plan, your strategy? How do you manage your time?
So a lot of it starts on Sunday, where I do a Sunday checklist, where I'll just review everything I got for the week, and I time block on my calendar everything. So of course you're going to have meetings. Of course you're going to have things like this podcast. But right before this, I had a time block just to catch up on some emails. And then right before that, I had a time block for looking for some new accounts and people that I could work with. Right. And so it's like every single thing is time blocked on my calendar for me, down to like when I'm cooking and eating dinner. And
Oh,
I
wow.
think it's just important to get that granular with it, because I think a lot of times if you don't, you look back at, now we're at the end of Q1 and you're like, where did all of the time go? But if you have everything on the calendar, you look back, you're like, wow, I did this, I did that, I did this. And you can kind of fact check yourself. And then on Sunday, another thing that I like to do as well is, so again, I'm building a lot of my stuff outside of the 8 to 5. So from 6 to 9, I'm sending myself calendar invites. So like tomorrow or today from 8 to 9, I have podcasts blocked off. And in the description of that calendar invite, I have 5 things that I'm going to get done during that hour. And so it's like research new guest, reach out to guest, make an intro for an upcoming episode. And so that's what I encourage people to. It's like, don't just put work on side business on Monday from 6 to 7, put on work on side business. And then in that calendar invite, put 3 or 4 bullet points that you're going to do during that time. And then what this really helps with is, I think a lot of times like high performers and people who want to achieve big goals, they have this mentality of like, am I really like moving the needle forward? Right. Cause like their goals are so big and it's like, oh my gosh, am I really making progress? But what's unique about tracking everything is you can go back on your calendar in March, February, January, and be like, wow, look at like all of the stuff that I did to move my business forward. The work just hasn't caught up yet to the results, if that makes sense. So
Yeah, totally. So are you doing this on Sunday? You plan out the week ahead, like, your blocks of what you're going to do for Monday through Saturday?
yep. And it takes 30 minutes. So I do a couple of things on Sunday. One, I look at the calendar and block off things for the week. So that's one. Two, I just look at all my emails and make sure I'm not missing anything glaring that like slipped through the cracks. Three is I look over my finances. So I look over like my personal budget. I look over my net worth, and I use personal capital, where you can plug in all your you can plug in all your accounts, and then it basically gives you like your live net worth. And I check that on Sundays just to get a picture of where I'm at. And then I also respond to like any text from friends or family that I may have missed, unfortunately, throughout the week. Because I think a lot of times entrepreneurs and people that are just growing in their career or business, and I struggle with this too sometimes, it's like sometimes you can let the friend relationships and the family relationships like start to slide. And so I never want to let those slide. So I always like double check on Sunday, like, all right, am I missing any like phone calls from like, I don't know, my mom or a text from my dad, or like, just so I'm not letting that slip through the crack. Cause I that's one of my core values is, you know, faith, family, finance, fitness, right? And finance, business and stuff falls into that, but it's making sure that each one of those 4 buckets are filled up. And I kind of audit myself on Sunday to say, like, am I filling up the family bucket, the faith bucket, the fitness bucket, and the finance bucket, and making sure that all of them are trying to be equal, because you're never going to have all of them 100% full, but the goal is to try to ebb and flow each one and get it as full as possible, rather than your finance bucket being at 100 and then your family bucket being at 10 and your fitness bucket being at 30. It's like, let's try to get all of these close to 100 at the same time.
Yeah. I love that you have your core values defined. That I find the people who know what they want to live by, their core values, they're able to navigate through decisions much easier, because they can say, does this align with who I want to be? So that's beautiful. Do you find that it's hard to when you're setting out these blocks, obviously things come up, right? So you can't always have a perfect schedule, because you know, people and different circumstances happen, but do you find it hard sometimes to stay committed, or do you feel ever that you're almost like locking yourself into like a prison, if you will, with time blocks and time management? And how do you manage that?
Yeah. And I used to like you said, lock myself into a prison and be like, these are concrete times. I'm not moving without, you know, no matter what, I'm not moving it. But I think it's important to get fairly flexible with it. But at the same time, I think going back to Sunday and like auditing where you're at with the businesses and stuff to make sure you're on track for your goals helps. For example, like I have a speaking engagement coming up April 11th. And I like to make sure I'm the best up there. So I do practice a couple times before. And I had 5:30 to 6:30 today blocked off to practice the speech, but I'm a part of a volunteer organization that hit me up to do some work for them today. And I haven't done anything in about a month. So I'm like, well, that's part of my core value is giving back. And then I audited, like, you know what? I practiced the speech 3 times. I've done it before. I don't need any more practice. I'm going to go and do this. So I think, yes, move things around, but like audit it at the same time. Now, if I wasn't ready and I know I needed to practice the speech, say, hey, sorry, you know, I'm not ready to commit to this volunteer thing today. Need to work on the speaking side of things a little bit more. So I don't know if that helps paint the picture enough, but.
Yeah, absolutely. So shifting gears here a little bit, how do you approach risk taking in your business? And also, what is the biggest risk that you have taken in your career?
How do I approach risk taking? I really think just auditing my risk tolerance. Like you were saying earlier, some people will go all in, cash in the accounts and build the company, which that's awesome. But, you know, that's not my risk tolerance. It's I'll throw some of my own money into it. I'll throw some of my own time. I'll throw my own energy. But at the same time, like I want to make sure that I'm, you know, financially stable in a sense as well. So that's kind of how I approach it as well, of looking like, okay, just because like my good friend completely jumped ship from his job and started his own company and now it's doing fairly well, but he had no income for a year, like I don't have that much risk. And it's not a good or bad thing. It's just auditing kind of where you're at, but also recognizing like if your risk is not as high as the person I just described that just completely jumped ship, started it from scratch, didn't have an income for a year, your business will probably get started a bit slower because this person I just described has way more time to work on the business. You know, they don't just have from 5 to 9, they have from whenever they get up to whenever they go to sleep. So I think if your risk tolerance is a little lower, like you do have to give yourself a reality that, yes, this is going to take a little bit more time. From the risk side of things, I think one of the biggest ones I took was probably trying to get that app off the ground, just because it did, we did spend a decent amount of our own money, me and two co-founders. We did spend a lot of time on it, and we did spend like some weekends away, like, because two co-founders were in Charleston, South Carolina. I'm in Charlotte. Halfway point's Columbia, South Carolina, not Columbia, South America, but Columbia, South Carolina. So it's about an hour and a half each. And like the only good time that we could meet all day was like a Saturday or Sunday. So like countless weekends I would sacrifice to go do this. And it was a big risk as well, because you're giving up your time, you're giving up your money, you're putting yourself out there. And it didn't work out because it didn't have a product market fit. We tried to get this thing off the ground in 2020. No one was traveling during COVID. So lack of product market fit. We had lack of communication. We only talked like once a week. If you're going into business with somebody, everyone that has a business knows that if you're going into business with somebody, you're getting into a business marriage, and marriages thrive off constant communication. So we had no communication. And because we had no communication, we had really no vision and direction. And then the last reason why we failed this project was we didn't have a mentor, right? You were talking about mastermind and the importance of surround yourself with the right people. What we should have done is approach somebody who built something similar and built that relationship, like I just said earlier, and tried to get in the door with them and learn from them, because successful people like helping successful people. And so I feel like looking back, and that's why I love taking the risk, because now I can talk about this on the podcast, talk about this on my speaking engagements. And now I have this whole list of stuff of what not to do on the future business of what I'm working on now. And at the end of the day, like I learned way more from doing this for a year than I did from, probably the 14 business and entrepreneurship classes I took in college. So.
Yeah. I think failure is one of the best ways to learn from personal experience, for sure. Obviously, you want to learn from other people if you can avoid it, but when you go through it yourself, I mean, you're not going to make the same mistake twice. So
100%.
Yeah. Are you part of any groups? Do you have mastermind groups? Do you have any mentors?
I have one that we meet on Sundays. It's a bit smaller around here. And then I have some mentors that have just been fortunate to indirectly build relationships with that are, levels ahead of me. And, and you probably will say the same thing, but like, if you want to find a mentor, like don't reach out to them. Hey, I want you to be my mentor. Like build the relationship and rapport first. And like one that I work with in Charlotte, great mentor of mine, we just started talking on LinkedIn. He's probably in his 40s, but wants to grow his social media. And so actually, like, just after we talked a couple of times, I sent him a Word document that I made that had like all these tips and strategies and advice. And I'm no social media expert, but like I know more than him because I'm growing my personal brand. And I basically just sent him this like whole like 3-page document out of nowhere. And he's like, man, like that took you a lot of time. Thank you so much. And like one thing led to another. We lined up a phone call. I asked him some questions, and now it's just like this kind of informal, hey, like, let's go get some lunch. And then hey, ask whatever you want while you're at this lunch type of thing. So
yeah, those are the best types of relationships if you can cultivate those.
Yeah. And return the favor, like I'm 27 years old, but like I've built a pretty successful career. My business is growing every day. I have a podcast I've been doing for 4 years. Like I have a lot that I can teach others as well. So yes, I do work with young professional clients on a paid basis, but also have a handful of people that like text me every couple months or, hey, can you talk for 10 minutes? I got a question. Sure. I'll go ahead and call you. And it's like return the favor as well, even if you're just a couple years out.
Yeah, totally. And regarding your mastermind, what does that look like? Is it a smaller group? Is it a big group? And what are the main benefits of you participating in that you've gotten so far from it?
Yep. So it's a smaller group. And I had another one that I was working with that was probably like 15 people. But this one's just a few of us. But I think both of them have served benefits. I think the main thing is just getting advice from others that maybe are a couple legs ahead of you or at the same spot as you. And that's going to help level you up a lot quicker than, books level you up, and you can see some books behind me. I love books, but like sometimes you can get your question answered in a mastermind in 10 minutes of talking rather than having to read a 300-page book. Now it's important to do both, but mastermind, I think you're going to learn a lot more. And the classic phrase of like, you are the average of the 5 people you hang around. I always use an example of if you have 5 fresh bananas and you put one rotten one, next to them, they're literally all going to be like brown and black the next day. But if you're so basically if you're surrounded by negative people or losers or people that aren't going anywhere, like you're going to be the next. So mastermind like forces you to be around like-minded individuals that are also growing.
Yeah. And what is the format? Do you guys have like an agenda? Do you guys meet and just kind of open format? What does that look like? Is it a free? Is it closed for paid only or?
Yep. So we meet on Sundays, or actually every other Sunday. We usually do Zoom, but we've obviously done some in-person stuff. And usually right around the end of the year, we'll do like a trip together. And we'll map out like we'll usually get like a crazy workout in where we're just like almost dead, basically, like, doing like ton of running, squats, like just like going after it with the fitness. And then we'll just talk about our goals for the year, how we can help each other. But yeah, format is a bit informal. Like it's free. It's just a few of us. Like I said, right now it's like, let's just talk us few, but maybe we'll open it up later to somebody else. But of course you want to make sure that the people that you're having in your mastermind, like it makes sense. And it's not just kind of like a one-off that can't really contribute, or, again, like if you're in kind of a hyper-focused mastermind where maybe it's just all salespeople, like it might throw it off a little bit if you have like a engineer in there. Not that the engineer is bad news, but it's like, for us, like we kind of like it to align with like business people versus a bunch of people from like a bunch of different backgrounds. Cause then the conversations, in my opinion, aren't going to be like, it's going to go too wide and not deep enough, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I've been part of groups that are, maybe it's just one specific industry and even one specific niche in that industry, and others where it's just a wide variety of completely different industries. And I agree that both of them, I think they provide different values. So like the groups that are different industries, there's a lot of cross-pollination where sometimes there's things that people are doing in one industry and it hasn't been implemented into the next, and it can be applied and you can get so much value from that. But then if you're getting more into the tactics and strategies and industry, like what's happening, news, development, definitely more valuable to have a specific group that's tied to that one, niche or that one industry. So just a couple more questions here because of time. What are you learning now?
Yeah. So really what I'm learning now is actually the real estate game. I know we were talking about that offline earlier, but I have my primary house, and I've just seen the benefits of like appreciation, and I've met a lot of people who have rentals. So right now I'm just trying to learn the rental game. Books and podcasts is what I've been diving into, and just the benefits that come with having rental properties. And I have the capital, but it's obviously making sure that you deploy it into the right areas and not make any dumb decisions. Like just because the house looks good and it's in a growing area, like, is it going to cash flow? Right. So like what I'm learning right now is like how to heavily analyze deals and make sure that they fit for you. So that's been fun because like the goal this year is to get into the investment space. And I've had some people that have rushed into it and have done well, but I've also have some people that I know that have rushed into it and actually haven't done well and lost money on the deal. So the goal is to have this deal be a big momentum builder. So that's one thing that I'm learning a lot. And then the other things is realizing that confidence, discipline, grit, determination, mental toughness. Like I used to think that those things were just like natural traits that some people have and some people don't. But I've really shifted my mindset. And through Angie Frisella, if anyone follows him,
75 hard.
75 hard, that
yeah.
dude, these are traits and skills that you learn over time, and they're just like any other skill. And like that's been a massive mindset shift for me and helped me break a lot of limited beliefs, because I used to always think like, oh man, like maybe I'm just not as disciplined as this person, or maybe I'm just not as like mentally tough. But it's like those things build over time as you continue to invest into them. And I've kind of been on that mentality, if you will, for about a year. And I've already seen like a lot more results from that. So definitely just continuing to cultivate on those as well.
That's amazing. And how do you, so I know mindset, and even the name of this podcast is mindset mastery. How do you cultivate the right mindset for your life, for business, for your health, relationships, all of that?
Yep. So I think it's a number of different things. I think a lot of people, again, going back to like what I mentioned of like, oh, I guess this person just has a positive mindset and I don't. And it's like the reason this person has a positive mindset is because they're doing the things that actually build them into a person that has a positive mindset. Just like, oh, that guy's jacked. Well, he's going to the gym, he's eating right, he's drinking protein shakes. Like it's the same thing. So for the kind of the mental health side of things, my routine, if you will, is mix of physical and mental. So every morning I'm getting 30 minutes of workout in, whether that's a run, a walk, lifting weights, because your mental and physical are so aligned. And then that's after the gym is going straight to gratitude, and writing down 3 things that I'm grateful for every day. And that's just going to instantly put your mind into a positive state. And then I do something to challenge myself, which is generally a cold shower. And there's a lot of health benefits with that, of course, but then there's also kind of the mental aspect of, man, I just did a freezing cold shower for like 5 minutes. And now this client backed out on a deal. That's nothing compared to like this freezing cold shower that I just had to go through. Right. And it like just makes you more kind of mentally tough. And then I think just having self-awareness of looking around and realizing, unfortunately, there's people that are very sick right now. Unfortunately, there's people that can hardly pay their rent. Unfortunately, there's people that have been laid off for 2 years, and realizing, if you have a successful business, if you have a job, if you have a roof over your head, if you have access to clean water, it's like, man, you have so much more opportunity than anyone else in the world. I mean, I went to Honduras for a week on a mission trip. And that was actually at a time that I was like really struggling mentally, like nothing like bad, but I was just like in this crazy comparison game that I was like, I'm so behind. And I was just like frustrated with myself. And then I went to Honduras and I saw like people living in like a 300 square foot hut with like a 10-person family with clean water 2 miles away. And it's like, whoa, I have so much opportunity and I'm not utilizing it. I'm wasting all my energy on being negative, when it's like such a perspective shift to realize like, you might have seen this post because it's been shared a couple of times, but it's like the job you have and the business you have that you hate is somebody's desire and wish out there. It's like, maybe you don't like your job, that's fine. But I bet you there's hundreds of people applying maybe for your same job, wishing that they could have that job. So it's like, do all you can with what you have type of mentality.
Yeah. No, that's so true. And a statistic I like sharing with people, especially younger entrepreneurs, is that if you're 35 years old or younger, you only make up 6% of all business owners in the US, which is a pretty small percentage. And yeah, it's so easy to compare yourself with social media. You look at the 0.0001% where there's these 20-year-olds making millions of dollars, but that's the exception. And I think everyone at some point probably struggles with that, with comparison of looking at what other people are doing and seeing where they are. But I think the best thing to do is just compare yourself to where you were yesterday, and not to anyone else, but to yourself, right? So
true.
Well, Chris, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on. Where can our listeners learn more about what you got going on and follow you online?
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. Next Level Minds is the podcast. We do episodes every other week. We're, I think, on episode 107 or 108 right now. And then you can connect with me on social media on Instagram at Chris Chapchap, CHAP. And then LinkedIn is just Chris Chapman on LinkedIn. And I should pop up there on one of the first searches, fortunately.
Okay, thank you. I'll have all those links in the description. And again, it was a pleasure having you on. Thank you for listening to this episode.
Thanks again, Thomas.